India and the Eurasian Economic Union, comprising Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, as well as Russia, among others, have signed the terms of reference to launch negotiations on a free trade agreement. The terms of reference were signed by Additional Secretary of the Department of Commerce, Ajay Bhadru, and Eurasian Economic Commissioner's Deputy Director of Trade Policy Department, Mikhail Cherkagev, in Moscow. The Ministry of Commerce and Industry, in a statement, said that the proposed FTA will boost exports, support micro, small and medium enterprises, and diversify market access. During the signing ceremony, both sides noted that the trade turnover between India and this region reached as much as $69 billion in 2024, registering a 7% increase over the previous year. The two sides also reaffirmed their commitment to early conclusion of the agreement and building a long-term institutional framework for trade cooperation. Now, this comes amid pressure from the US in a form of additional tariffs or secondary tariffs on India's import of Russian oil. Now, US still remains India's largest trading partner at almost double the size of the Eurasian region. In the last fiscal year of 2024-25, the total bilateral trade between India and the US had reached $131.8 billion, with the US remaining India's largest trading partner. Now, in the last fiscal, India's exports to the US, remember, rose 11%, almost 12%, to $86.5 billion against $77 billion the previous year. Now, coming back to this possible FTA with Russia and other partners in the region, speaking about the signing of the terms of reference for the India-Eurasian Economic Union on a free trade agreement, India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar expressed his confidence in growing trade ties between Russia and Eurasian leaders. Listen in.
We are meeting here after about 10 months since the last session in November 2024 in New Delhi. And I think this is perhaps the shortest intervals between two sessions that we've ever had. Over the last 4 years, Excellency, our bilateral trade in goods has increased, as you have noted, from more fivefold, from $13 billion in 2021 to $68 billion in 24-25, and it continues to grow. A major trade balance has accompanied the growth. It has increased from 6.6 billion to 58.9 billion, which is about 9 times. So we need to address that urgently.
If the Indian goods are facing difficulties entering the US market, the Russian market would welcome Indian imports to the most extent possible. So don't worry about that. So as far as energy is concerned, indeed, so we see that actually that would be quite detrimental to the global economic stability and energy security. It is not in the Western nature, which was clearly demonstrated in recent years. So they behave like neocolonial powers, just exploiting and just thinking about benefit for themselves. So we can just agree that this pressure is unjustified. The especially recent telephone call by President Putin to Prime Minister of India, Modi ji, explaining and sharing the information about the recent developments around Ukraine, about this turbulent situation. That means that India matters very much to us. We are sharing, we are coordinating, and we are discussing everything. So we are absolutely capable to find any solution for the mutual satisfaction. Anyone in the world who is valuing its sovereignty and independence is at risk for the pressure from the West. That means just one thing. If West criticizes you, you are doing everything right.
All right, my colleague, Executive Editor of News 9, Amit Kumar Ranjan, joins me from the newsroom with latest developments on this story. Amit, good morning. Thank you for joining me here. Help us understand the timing of the signing of these terms of reference especially as we are less than a week away from the potential secondary tariffs that US had threatened on India for import of Russian oil, and India now going ahead and signing the terms of reference and eyeing a potential FTA.
Thank you, Kartik. This comes as a big boost and a big boost to the confidence of Indian industry. Remember, US, despite India's trade surplus with the US still being around $41 billion, up from around $35 billion in the last fiscal, but the US has termed India as a dead economy, and this will come as a big boost to Indian manufacturers. They will get access to Eurasian markets. The trade with Eurasian nations was stalled after the Ukrainian war began. So this has kick-started again last year. But this comes as a big boost, and between Eurasia and India, India is the manufacturing haven, and it will also be a big boost to the Make in India drive that this government has been pushing over the last decade. And Indian MSMEs are the most likely to benefit from this. The combined GDP of both the partners is around 6.5 trillion. So there's immense room for growth for both.
Right. So, Amit, stay with me. I also want to understand specifically, at a time when, like I mentioned, US is looking at slapping those secondary tariffs. Now, we don't know after the Alaska summit where there was a more cordial exchange between Donald Trump and President Putin, and there were reports of US potentially not going ahead with those secondary tariffs. And the fact of the matter being that India is very clearly diversifying beyond the US when it's looking at stitching trade agreements, because the trade agreement with the US still seems perhaps a little distance away. We've signed the deal with UK. We have gone ahead and committed that the trade deal with EU will come through by end of this year. And now we're talking about a potential FTA with the Eurasian region as well. So overall, does it seem that India is not putting all its eggs in the US basket and really looking at stitching up trade partnerships with the rest of the world in the potential eventuality that a trade deal with the US may not come through?
Yeah. Not putting all its eggs in one basket too, and India does need to expand its markets and partners worldwide beyond the US. This also drives voices in the US to re-strengthen ties with India, and that has already started happening, as you mentioned. So it is a two-way thing. From India's side, it needs to look for new partners to expand its trade in the eventuality, the worst case scenario that the US does go through with its 50% trade tariff and maybe more. And on the other side, this will drive voices in the US to re-strengthen ties with the trade ties with India, which have been good so far.
I mean, US and India ties have been great for decades, but of course, that is the boat that Donald Trump is rocking right now. But Amit, I also want to specifically understand that India is already pretty clear that it is not cutting down on its oil import from Russia. And that has been the pressure that the US has been adding on India. Now, India is pretty clear, and in its statement, it has reiterated multiple times that India is going to protect its own economic interests. And at a time like that, to go ahead and further strengthen that relationship, do you see this as some sort of a messaging to the US administration that, hey, India is not going to back down under pressure from the United States?
It could be, and I'm just gesticulating here who blinks first. So India is putting doing all the right things to put pressure on the US and get the message clear that they are going to do what is best for their economy. So if buying Russian oil is good for India's economy, they are going to do it, and they are not going to back down under US pressure. So that is the messaging India is giving to the US. Now, does the US respond with higher tariffs to counter India, or does it look back at what the way the trade ties between India and US have grown over the last decade or so, and even more, and basically weighs down on that and relaxes tariffs, or at least does not increase the tariffs to the amount that it says it will, remains to be seen.
Of course, it remains to be seen, but there's also pressure, Amit, on Donald Trump by Nikki Haley, and that also comes at a time when there is stress on the U.S. administration that perhaps breaking ties or not having the same emphasis, strategic emphasis on India may be a mistake for the U.S. in the long term. In this current geopolitical, geoeconomic order that is getting rewritten by President Donald Trump, do you think the U.S. can afford to mess around with India as well?
It seems everything that the US does not want are the moves that India is making. India is getting close to China, something that US would never want, should have happened. India's ties with Russia are not breaking down. We are not stopping, at least we are not stopping buying Russian oil immediately. We are expanding our trade ties with the European Union, apart from the EAEU that we have just done right now. So India is making all the right moves to counter the pressure that has come from the US. And geopolitically, what India is doing is something that US would never have liked in normal circumstances, like getting close to China. That is one.